Hey there, Games Apprentice back with another Evercade video, and this week I'm going to be looking at the newly released Indie Heroes Collection 2. I really enjoyed the first collection. Is this one as good, or is it even better? And what, dear viewers, have I decided is my Evercade Gem of the Week? Let's find out. First off, disappointingly, if you put both these carts into your Evercade Versus, it doesn't reveal any hidden games, which is a shame. Secondly, the new one doesn't come with any stickers. The first one set a precedence for stickers. I expect stickers in my Indie Heroes collection. Where are my stickers? There's 12 games on this one. Here they are ranked from worst to best. This one isn't a terrible game, and the fact that it's last on the list speaks volume about how well curated this collection is. It's a single screen arcade platformer that supports up to 2 players. You've got a timer and a goal of how many enemies you need to defeat with your weird little hand buzzer power. If you subscribe to my channel, you'll have seen that I'm not generally a fan of this kind of game, which is one of the reasons that it's last on this list. There's not much enemy variety and the game feels a little clunky. But I didn't have as bad a time as I thought I was going to. It was actually kind of fun trying to race against the clock. Unlike a lot of indie games, the difficulty level felt spot on as well. If you like this sort of arcade game, you'll probably enjoy this one to some extent. This one was something a bit different. It felt like it'd make a better multiplayer game though than a single player one. Unfortunately, that's not an option. In this game, you play a barman who needs to get his customer pints of beer as quickly as possible. Think of a really basic overcooked. You can move left and right, you've got one button to dispense and give people the beer, and the other button to drop the beer if you screw up. But not to brag, I never needed that button. To be honest, that's my main gripe with this game, just how easy it is. 5 levels in and I didn't feel as challenged or remotely close to making a mistake. The game's difficulty increases as they add more types of beer and the amount of time customers are willing to wait decreases. But I felt by this point in the game, I should at least have felt a little challenged. Maybe it gets harder, but the problem is I was bored by this point. For me, it's just too simplistic for a single player game and starts way too slow for how long the levels are. If you watched my previous Indie Heroes collection review, well, make sure to watch it after this video. But spoilers, you'll know that I was fairly critical of Anguna. This sequel has a lot of the same problems in that it's just copying a better game and doing it worse with no original ideas. However, one of the things I disliked about the first game was the bland art style, which I feel this game improves upon, going for a more retro aesthetic. Being able to grind to level up and get more health is a nice feature, making the difficulty something a bit easier to get over. However, having to wander around the bland looking overworld every time you die is boring, and some of the enemies are really frustrating to fight. It often feels like this game goes out of its way to make you not have a good time with it. Like a dark room full of annoying green enemies whose attack is just to walk forward at you. Kind of sounds like I hate this game and it should be last, but Zelda clones are always fun. I just would have liked to see a bit more from this one. Speaking of Zelda clones, for some reason they've put 2 on this cart. Personally, if I was curating it, I'd have dropped Anguna for something else to give it more variety. This is the best Zelda clone on the cart though. This one feels more blatant with the art style, the music and the weapons. It's clearly heavily inspired by Zelda and Zelda 2. Now that's a nice pairing to rip off, as you get both a top-down Zelda game and a side-on Zelda game. I'd probably rather play this than either of those 2 games, but that's purely because I don't rate Zelda until A Link to the Past. Whereas the previous game relies on the difficulty of the enemies and how annoying they are, this game relies more on exploration. That's where its difficulty lies, just finding where to go. The first of two trilogies on this list being super meta as it's a collection within a collection. The first game is probably both my favourite and least favourite within this trilogy. It's a very basic, hard as nails platformer. It's got 4 graphical styles, which is a nice touch, and it controls well. The problem with it though is the difficulty is just absolutely all over the place. Levels constantly switch between far too easy and far too difficult. It generally all comes down to this one enemy that's repeated over and over, that has timings that's really hard to work out and require absolute precision. This wouldn't be too bad if you didn't have to start over when you die, but they should have gone with a Super Meat Boy style level of ranks and times rather than having lives. Even with save states, this was just incredibly frustrating from the second level. The sequel is the worst of the 3. They completely went the other way with this one. They've tried to make the graphics better, but completely losing its style and identity to just look generic. It's also incredibly slow, you're just constantly waiting around for things to be in the right position, it's really dull. The third game is a combination of the first 2 games in some ways, however it leans more like the second one than the first one. It sticks to that dull art style, but it's got a little bit more pace and difficulty about it. This is quite an interesting set of games that are all very different but all involve what I think is a guinea pig. The first game is an arcade game where you need to catch carrots falling from the sky by moving left and right. What makes it more difficult is that the carrots are a certain colour and you need to match that colour by cycling through 4 different ones. It's fun for a little while but feels like once you've got the hang of it, it can only beat you by just being impossible. The second game was my favourite of the 3. It's basically a platform puzzle game where you need to get to the exit of the room. You do this by collecting Tetris-like blocks and placing them in the room, allowing you to use them as platforms. The controls feel odd and it took a while for me to get my head around it, I was constantly just killing myself. But it's quite a tricky yet fun platformer that I'd not played anything like previously. The third game was my least favourite on here, but again this might be more of an issue with my genre preference as opposed to anything wrong with the game itself. If you saw my Oliver Twins collection review, you'll probably recognise this concept as it was done on one of the Disney puzzle games. I didn't like it then, and I don't like it here. It does improve on that though. The concept is that basically you've got to jump on the blocks. When you jump on them, they'll either count down or disappear, and you need to clear all the blocks and also get to the exit. It does get trickier, but I find these games really dull. There's a lot of difficult games on this collection, so it was really refreshing to play one where death doesn't really play a big part in it. Lunar Journey is an item collection adventure game. You're on the moon and you float around chatting to aliens and finding ways to progress with the various item-based puzzles. The items work automatically, so you don't really need to figure out which items work where, but it's fairly obvious anyway. It's a game that's art style and humour offers plenty of charm. While the gameplay isn't exactly mind-blowing, it's something a bit different for this collection. Up next we've got a Game Boy Metroidvania game in which you control a blob. As the blob you can move around and climb walls and briefly the ceiling. As the game progresses, you unlock the ability to be able to jump, and also you get a really rubbish attack. It's a fairly frustrating game, sometimes it's hard to see what's killing you, and sometimes you can jump up to the next screen above, other times there's an invisible wall that you bounce off, which is incredibly annoying, as there's no way of telling which it is. Even for the Game Boy, it's not particularly a good looking game, it's definitely not the best use of the Game Boy graphics. The music though does a good job at creating atmosphere, even if it does become particularly grating. Another game with plenty of charm, Nessie the Robot is a fairly clunky action platformer. You've got the ability to jump and shoot slightly in front of you. It pays homage to a number of NES games, which can be seen in its levels, colour palettes and backgrounds. It's cute but pretty bland for the most part. The really bad abrupt transitions are annoying and ever present throughout. Defeat an enemy and it just suddenly gone. And when you defeat a boss, it just quickly cuts to an end of level screen even though you weren't even sure you were hurting the boss in the first place. The highlight of the game is probably the final boss, in which the screen moves, forcing you to make use of what turns out to be a pretty decent platform mechanics. It's a shame this isn't in there for the most part. Once you finish the game, you unlock a new mode which is harder. However, the new mode also replaces scrolling with just screen switching, making jumps from one screen to the next incredibly annoying, as you'll often just blindly jump into a pit. Easily the best looking and sounding game on the collection is this one. Clearly putting a lot of effort into their presentation. I'm not a huge fan of the colour palette, but everything else looks really good and the animations are impressive for this collection. With this one, you control a warrior woman who has a crow following her around. You can attack with your weapon, which starts off as a broken dagger but can be upgraded. You can also send out the crow to attack, but only a limited number of times. This works like a fairly short range projectile that didn't seem massively helpful. It's got some Metal Slug vibes with the prisoners that you've got to free that then thank you. I really enjoyed this one. My only gripe with it was just that it was a bit on the slow side. A run button would have been much more welcome here and would have put it higher up the list. An NES style Metroid clone, you control a fox with a gun. You need to explore the areas, map free, unlocking different abilities to help you on the way. I had a really good time with this one, and my only gripes with it were that it didn't look great and that it's a bit on the short side. Other than that though, I thought it was a really fun and well made Metroid clone. It's a little clunky and can suffer from performance issues at times, but it's well designed and it gets the difficulty level absolutely spot on. And it's much better than any Metroidvania clone has any right to be on a 12 game collection. Hopefully they go on and make a bigger and better sequel to this. My Evercade Gem of the Week goes to the game that's featured most prominently on the box. The guy behind Flea from the first collection is back with a very different game in the form of Tapeworm Disco Puzzle. Initially I was a bit disappointed in this one, as the name suggested to me I was in for some kind of rhythm based game, which it isn't. The game is a puzzle solving game in which you control a worm inside a cassette tape. The worm has a finite length and can pop out of either side of the tape. The puzzles start really simple, but grow with complexity as things like the ability to increase the length of your worm, fleas, and portals are all gradually added to the game. The game also offers a completely separate two-player mode that if you're feeling really adventurous, you can attempt by dual-wielding controllers. It's a shame you can't just play this mode with one controller, as using the face buttons for the second worm would have worked fine. Check this one out. Now, the main problem that I've got with this collection is that it's just the games are simply not as good as the first collection. Second problem is, where are my stickers? You know, I want stickers. I don't even like stickers, but I want stickers. On the plus side though, the worst games on this collection are probably just middle of the pack on that first collection. However, when in the future I make my video on what are the best Evercade games of all time, none of the games on this collection are going to make that list. It's a solid collection, but just nothing exceptional about it. By Evercade standard though, it's pretty good, and I'm going to score this one 7.5. As always, thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to like the video, and if you want to see more of my content with reviews, rankings and hidden gems, please don't forget to click subscribe, and I'll catch you next time.